Hi everyone, I am with Fiorella Martin. She helps women over the age of 40 find and keep relationships. So she is an expert on relationships and she's here to talk with us all the way from Australia. Welcome, Fiorella.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here because I think this topic is so timely, especially the way sociology of dating has kind of changed in the world. So it's a really interesting topic, and I'm going to ask you some questions about what it is you do exactly. But from in your own words, how would you describe what you do for women over 40?
Well, over the last 22 years, I've realized and I've been fascinated with why is it that people don't get along from a very young age. And of course, I saw all of my relationship failures and the dynamics in my own family. And so basically, I created a signature system which is um, dealing with the attachment trauma part of it, which is where your relationship dynamics start, and then how to qualify the right person, a secure attachment person. And then even beyond that, a lot of relationships fail because they don't know how to keep that relationship alive and thriving. So I created a program that addresses those three phases.
So, will you describe a little bit about attachment trauma for people who don't know what you mean?
Sure. A lot of people have heard of attachment styles, and attachment styles are basically when there is a not so secure attachment with the caregiver. So the caregiver may not give the attention, provide the needs, emotional, physical, to the baby. And it can start as early as straight away from birth, but essentially in the first 3 years of life, the brain is getting mapped for relationships. And so you can have both of the first two that I'm going to mention are about the rejection and abandonment, but they are internalized differently. The first one is the fear of separation, so it's an anxious preoccupied. So they become very intent on attaching um, all the time and fearing of loss of that attachment. The second one is the dismissive avoidant, and they've just given up on the whole attachment thing. So emotions are overwhelming and they internalize, I'm safe when I'm on my own, I'm safe when I'm away from other people. Then there's a third category, which is where there's like a kind of like a roller coaster effect between the two, and it's called a fearful avoidance or dysregulated attachment style. And they'll come forward, push back, come forward, push back, and they want attachment, but they also reject it. The best attachment is the secure attachment style. Some people say there's about 50% of the population that come from that idyllic attachment. I would challenge that in my experience. A lot of people haven't had that enough, and when someone's had good attachment, they feel they have the right to exist. They feel they have the right to get their needs met, and they feel they are welcome with joy, and they're much more calm in their relationships. So yeah, that's pretty the whole attachment dynamic.
Okay, so with the attachment dynamics, the four, can they be fluid and come and go, or are you basically stuck in an attachment style since you're young?
No, when you do the inner work, which you and I both know, from a clinical hypnotherapy dealing with the subconscious mind, the brain is neuroplastic. So even though we have installed a program of that type of attachment, when the inner work is done and we change the inner self concept of what's possible for us, then the attachment style absolutely can change into secure attachment. Absolutely. And when you evolve into that, then you're more likely to take your time, when you're meeting people and assess, the right person for me. Are they the right relationship person? There's no rush, there's no drama, because you're happy within yourself. You've reconnected with yourself. You've come home to yourself in that secure base.
Yes, so when you work with people, is the first thing you do you find out their attachment style? What are the first steps you take with someone when you begin working with them?
Yeah, so the first thing I do obviously is a strategy call, where I assess where the clients are at, and there is a ACE test, which is the adverse childhood events, that I get them to fill out before they even book the appointment, and I get a score from them. So historically, anyone who is a 5 or above are going to have some addictions and attachment trauma. Um, some people have had, because it's a questionnaire of 10 questions, depending on how severe the situation was, they can also have attachment trauma, even if they've only scored below 5. So that's the first thing that happens. So once I have that first assessment, I actually know what we're dealing with and proceed from there.
So your goal is to get people to secure attachment.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the first part.
I actually just did the test recently. I've only actually in the last few years really learned about attachment styles and how they really affect not just our relationships, but our day to day. And as we know, things that happen in childhood are more ingrained. Things happen throughout our lives that affect us, but the things in childhood are the ones that stay consistent with us. So yeah, it's such a good idea to get to the bottom of that first. And then after that, when you work with people, where do you take it from there to help them find a really good lasting relationship? What are the steps after you kind of determine where they're at, and then you resolve issues surrounding attachment theory? Where do you go from there?
Well, first of all, there's a set of criteria to look for in a secure attachment type male, if it is a male or a female that they're looking for. Secure attachment people tend to be a lot more calm, and if someone's addicted to to drama and trauma, the tendency is that they'll find someone who is secure a little bit boring, right? Because they don't just jump on you and love bomb you. They're quite laid back, and they take their time to get to know you. So there's a very definite set of criteria, and patience, and having the right questions, and having a timeline for discovering. Because one of the offers that I have for people, even on my group, is the 36 questions. So the 36 questions was devised by a psychologist, whereby when you identify someone who's secure, you actually can start finding out more with these 36 questions, which means that you get to learn about things that people don't really discuss unless it's brought up as a question. So you discover a lot more about the other person. But the initial questions that I've always given for the very first, say, meetup meeting, when people say meet someone on an app and they go and have their first coffee, it's like, what do you love about your job? What do you love to do in your spare time? Where do you see yourself in the next 12 months? Right? So what the strategies behind those 3 questions is, the big part of their life is work. The secondary part of their life is hobbies, activities, interests. And then do they see themselves in a relationship in 12 months' time? Because some people are emotionally unavailable, not ready for that level of commitment. They're not at that stage of life. So if a relationship doesn't feature in their future, they're probably not really ready for a relationship that most women want at that stage.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, why did you choose the age group over 40? Is there a certain reason that yeah, let's get into that.
Yes. When I researched demographics, who would be the most likely to be wanting to focus in this part of their life. Identified that women who are professional, women who are high achievers, women who have their own business, have identified with that and have pushed. I was one of them. Pushed the whole relationship thing to one side because it's too hard. It's in the too hard basket. I'll get my, that the mentality is I'll get my identity, my sense of satisfaction, my sense of purpose in life through my career and my work. That's where I'm good at. But then it gets to a point that they feel exhausted, they feel tired, they don't want to be in bed with their computer at 1 o'clock at night on a weekend night. It gets hard, going to parties and, just being on your own all the time. There comes a time where there's a shift of focus, where the career is no longer enough, and they want to share some of those experiences, because money doesn't make you happy, but share the experiences with someone that you feel happy with and you feel you have support. The other thing is they're missing support. A lot of women beyond 40, they're missing that constant support. They feel they have to do everything. Independence for women is stressful. It raises the cortisol level and it raises testosterone. And so women feel much more stressed and alone when they've been doing that for that long. So over 40, over 50, women start to feel empty and tired, and they just want to have someone to share their life with. And also the children situation is no longer an issue for them.
Right.
Although I have had women up until about 40, I think the last one was about 43, she still wanted to have a child. She did meet the guy and she did end up having a child and get married. So
Wow.
she was still within that bracket.
Yeah. It's true that the number one deciding factor in people's lives for happiness is the quality of their relationships. And it's like you said earlier, you can't, people have a certain relationship with money, but it's not the same thing. Or with their jobs, there's a certain amount of satisfaction, but it's not the same thing. So it is very important. So I wanted to circle back to what I had mentioned to you before we started live, and that's the sociology of relationships has really changed. The way people have relationships certainly in the last 10 to 15 years, things have changed. The way they meet, the way we go about interacting. So have you found, there's a certain demographic that, I'm talking really about dating apps and online meeting, because that's primarily how it's done, especially with a couple of generations for sure. So have you found that there are some people that are really resistant to meeting that way and you kind of have to teach them the approach to it? Or what is your experience around working with people around
Yes,
dating apps?
there's definitely a strategy for meeting people online, and it's definitely the way that most people meet now. Unless you have a regular activity that allows you to be exposed to men because you enjoy that particular activity, like it could be anything, but let's say you have a sport or you have an activity, a hobby that allows you to be exposed to other men. But meeting people online is a much better qualifying process, and there's definitely a strategy. So the idea of meeting people online is that you have to know yourself very well and be able to have a profile, which I describe eliminates more than 90% of people looking at your profile. And there's a criteria of eliminating people who are not willing to engage or at least make a decent conversation around your profile, identifying what they saw in your profile. So there's a strategy that's the meeting place, and then moving that into meeting someone face to face for a 30-minute catch up. And that will determine whether you see that person again. The strategy I offer my clients is that ideally you'd want to be doing that with different people 3 to 5 times a week, right? None of that's going to work if you don't know how to eliminate very quickly. and you'll
Yeah.
find someone a lot faster when you've arrived at a place that you're not desperate and you're patient.
You know what? I have to tell you, I've never been on a date, never used a dating app or a dating site. So my information about them comes from my friends' experience, and both men and women. And I have never heard anything positive. They've never met anyone they liked. And at the least, they were sort of just wasting time on there, disappointed. And at the worst, they spent time with people they didn't really want to, and they ended up with regrets. That's what I've heard. Now, I know there are exceptions because there must be, but that's what I've heard. So, how do you help people who might come in with that attitude of, I don't want to use a dating site, I don't like meeting people that way? How do you help them to sort of approach it differently?
Well, if they don't want to be on a dating site, they definitely need to be in meetup groups. They need to be in what I call target rich environment. And that's the only other way, because if you are not on a dating site, I mean, I met my partner in a meetup group because I play pool. I love playing pool. So it developed as a friendship, and
Yeah.
then it kind of moved into something more. So the old ways, which we no longer have access to unless it's a meetup group, is the village environment where there's no pressure. You just get to know people slowly over time, week after week. And then you start having a conversation, and then it gets taken outside of that environment to a coffee catch up where you
Yeah.
get to know them as friends first. Getting to know people as friends first. If you can be friends first, and that person can happen anywhere. The thing is that if you're ready, you're more likely to meet people because you're much more open. And it can happen in a supermarket. I know you've heard this before. It can happen anywhere. Like you can meet someone at a train station on holidays, you know.
Well, I've always done it out in the wild. I've never used a dating site, but they intrigue me. It intrigues me, the sociology of it, because there are a couple of generations of people who don't know any other way. That's what they're used to, is meeting someone with a screen in between. And in fact, many of them don't feel comfortable going out and meeting people in real life like you just described. It doesn't come naturally to them anymore. So it's very fascinating to me the way people meet now, and the convenience of it. But I like the way you were saying that it's time management. You teach them how to eliminate certain people. Maybe those people I described before who are just on it, kind of wasting people's time or not really interested in them, but still meeting up with them. Like, how do you teach them to sort of get past that quickly?
Well, it's very quick, really. And it's no different to social media marketing in a way. Your profile is your first impression that people get. And it's supposed to be designed to eliminate people. And your strategy needs to be, if you're someone looking, that if someone just sends you a smiley face, just ignore and block. If someone just sends you, anything that could be perceived as not warm, not personal, not identifying with your profile, you just eliminate and block. So that saves you a lot of time, and you only focus on having those meetups when you've had a bit of conversation that it sounds like the person has emotional availability, is secure and stable, and is actually willing to invest some curiosity and interest in you as a person. So there's definitely ways of screening, and there's definitely ways of not wasting time, because otherwise you will be running around with. But the other thing too is I've got friends that I've helped, and one of them is in a relationship now just recently, in the last couple of months. So her whole strategy was not working for her. She was catching up with people who were literally saying, "Oh, you're too old for me," or "You're, not slim enough," and that was completely because of the way that she was interacting with them online on dating apps.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the same age as me. So as you get older, it does get a little bit more challenging because of the way that women are perceived after a certain age, and men having better choices. It's just about the way that men are. Anyway, so I suggested a few strategies to her, and then she met someone on an app, and they're just like two peas in a pod. I mean, they're so suited and they're so happy.
It's just you taught her the formula. You had mentioned earlier when people feel that sense of desperation, they kind of will talk to anyone. Do you have to, when you're working with clients, do you find that you have to sort of teach or draw out of them what they really want because they're not actually clear on who they want as a partner? Or do most people come in saying, I want this, help me find them?
Well, when women are desperate, it's they haven't identified what it is that's going to work for them. And the only reason they are desperate is because they are not secure in themselves. So when you're able to self-soothe, self-regulate, and have a good relationship with yourself, the relationship becomes an addition, an enhancement to your life rather than your whole life. And it evolves into a partnership later on. But the desperation tends to stop people from really looking inside and saying, well, this is the life that I want to have. These are the things that I need in my life. And this is the sort of person that I need to find. And yes, we do formulate that once we're at that stage, for sure, because you have to know what you want. And I've even helped friends in Rome. Like when I was there, I had a lawyer and her friend, they were 35 and they were saying, oh, there's all these, cretini in Italian. It's like kids in English. They're not good, and they're not, well, that mindset is never going to allow you to meet the right people. And I got them both to do a list of things they like, find someone, an image of someone that they liked, and put it on a vision board. Within 6 months, both of them had met their partner, and they're still with them. One of them got married, the other one is in a living situation ever since then. It's really not that difficult once you know the steps.
Yeah, your mindset is everything. It's true. And you had mentioned before that some people, I think, equate love with drama because if it doesn't feel passionate, if someone's not constantly proving their love, then maybe it's not right. But it's actually the opposite. When things are very calm and stable, that's the best kind of love. What do you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. So Harville Hendrix came up with the phrase, love equals home. So love equals home is a formula of what is love. Is love pain? Is love addiction? Is love drama? Is love, a toxic interaction of push-pull and even abuse? So unless that formula has changed to a different type of interpretation of what love really is. And by the way, a lot of people who have had that kind of dysfunctional background, sometimes they learn love from a pet, right? Because they haven't learned love from their family of origin. Mm-hmm. So love creates a hormone called oxytocin. It's released when there's kindness, there's affection, there's closeness, and also kissing. That's the other thing that we haven't even gone into. Why that's a danger zone until you know who this person is, because it releases oxytocin through your whole body and your brain starts to wire and bond to this person. So that's why I say to my clients, no kissing until you know who you're dealing with. Like, who is this person, right? Do you really want to attach yourself and bond to someone you don't even know? Love is a very interesting question because it's an act, it's a verb. It's not really just a feeling. It's how does someone behave towards you? Are they devoted to you, or are they just interested in the physical. So depending on how that equation gets changed and the interpretation, learning how to meet your needs is really important, but you have to feel the right you have to have those needs met and communicate that. A lot of questions don't get asked early enough, and questions that could affect lifestyle. So, for example, if someone that you meet could have really great traits, but that person loves to spend the whole weekend watching football, and that's not your thing, well, there's a big chunk of a relationship that's just going to go and not available because one person's just not in the relationship. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that need to be understood before going into it.
Yeah, well, oxytocin, we call it the cuddle drug, but kissing is one thing, and then sex is a whole other thing. I know that especially in Western culture, with women, if they have sex with someone, there's this whole sort of attachment that happens after because of the chemical bonding. Men don't have it as much. Women really do. So then if you add that into the mix, it creates it's more confusion if it's someone who isn't really interested in a partnership with you.
Yeah, because Freud came up with the term of the anesthetic phase. And the anesthetic phase is the moment that sex happens, that the female brain literally goes into anesthetic. Like you don't see all the warts and all of this person because you're so enamored with, the bonding chemicals. And then it's designed for reproduction. So it can be anything from 6 weeks to 18 months where suddenly you wake up and you think, who is this person? I didn't know this side of this person. And, when you talk to women, most women will be able to tell you that this person that they thought was something suddenly changes a few months down the track. But that's because the bonding chemical is now sort of subsided and familiarity kicks in and everyone becomes a lot more comfortable, and suddenly you find out things that horrify you or you just didn't see before, and you think, why didn't I see that before? Why didn't I just ask the right question?
And you also see what you want to see in the beginning, because we categorize people into the friend-foe relationship category, and once our brain puts them into that category the way we want to see them, we get that confirmation bias where we're focusing in on the things that we like about them and sort of deleting all the things that might not work. We're not paying attention to those. So that happens too in the first several months of going out with someone, and then you suddenly come out of that too and think in retrospect, oh, they weren't really a good fit for me, but I didn't notice those things. I didn't want to focus on those things.
No, I do believe that you need to be able to be good friends with someone first and have that trust and respect as a human before you start thinking of moving it into a dating situation, because everything changes anyway when you move into a dating situation, like kissing, then it moves on to the intimacy part. And then the other big turning point is if you start living with someone. And the wrong time of that can change things as well.
Well, when you are meeting someone, when you're meeting someone online, how do you say to them, I want to just meet you as a friend first and then start there? Because it's a good idea, because when people go right into the dating, the romantic dating, I think it was Kevin Hart, one of the comedians, calls it, you send in the representative. It's not you. You send in your best version of you, and that lasts for a few months, and then, of course, it dissipates. So it's a good idea to be friends because you get to see who that person really is and know their value system, all the things that matter. So how do you do that on a dating site without going straight to the romantic part?
Well, first of all, when women start to use their feminine side, and I'm not talking about the girly side, but the feminine side where they're honoring, protecting themselves, the best way is to say, I need to get to know you before we move into anything further. I'd like to get to know you first. I don't rush into things like that straight away. And that can be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, but I would guarantee that it would take at least 3 months. Because after 3 months, very few people will be able to uphold the mask or their social mask and their best behavior.
Yeah, it's true.
It's familiarity will bring with it the sense of people relax and you start to see other sides. And you know, there are definite phases in this process. There's the 3 months phase, then there's the 3 to 6 months phase, then the 6 to, you know, and further down the track there's negotiation, because the Gottmans who have studied relationship and they're the experts in relationships, they talk about the fact that there are going to be things that are going to be gridlock long term, things that you're not going to be able to change, you need to accept about each other, but also that essentially, I think they talk about 60% of problems will never get resolved. So it's about how do you stay connected, how do you negotiate the differences, how do you repair, there's repair attempts. All of that happens in the negotiation stage. But you need to have someone who's emotionally intelligent enough and emotionally available and invested in the relationship to be able to move through into those phases.
Definitely. I think it's really important too to be able to see things from another person's perspective and not just your own.
Yeah, to step into the other person's model of the world. But depending on how that affects your own values and what you need in a relationship too, right? Because the other person might, well, I'll use the football idea again. The other person likes to watch football, but if you have a conversation about that, it may not be the whole weekend that's necessary.
Yeah. One thing I'm going to mention, and I'm going to use cliches just to use examples, but one thing I always find interesting is, you know, you'll have a husband and wife, and the wife will complain about, well, he's messy. He likes to leave his things around the house. And when I ask him to pick them up, he just doesn't do it. And I think to myself, well, her set of values is she likes a very tidy, clean house. His set of values might be that he likes a lived-in house. He likes the ability to have those spaces where he can put his things and spread them out. Two different values, two different perspectives, but what we so often want is we complain that the other person won't just do what we want, because what we're asking them to do is change their values to adhere to ours, but they're seeing it from a different perspective. But yeah, so you have to allow that. That's part of the compromise and negotiation. Like you said, you have to allow for those two different perspectives and not expect your partner just to adhere to and change their values for yours.
Mm. It's interesting you picked that one, because the Gottmans talk about that as a very specific issue between the two of them. She's a very neat freak.
Yeah, I
Wants
think
everything tidy and
common.
clean.
It's common.
And he's not, you know, he just doesn't think about things like that. His head is somewhere else. So yeah, you need to, one, there's a huge acceptance required of the differences. And I like to use, I know this probably sounds a little bit off track, but when you have a dog, right, people who love dogs, and you have a dog, you know that dogs are going to behave a certain way. And because you love them, you're prepared for those ways and how it affects your life. They might shed, they might, you know, leave things everywhere. But there's a huge level of acceptance when people have dogs. And another lady who talks about relationships a lot, and I forget, Ariel Ford, I think, she talks about a story where, you know, a lady's husband used to love bagels with these poppy seeds, and they had white floors, right? And she was annoyed every time she had to clean those white poppy seeds up. And then the thought came to her, oh, I wish I wouldn't have to clean these poppy seeds all the time. But then she thought, but then I wouldn't have him, right? So then she would do it because she was happy with the fact that she had him in her life. So it's a different way of looking at things, and that can help a lot.
It's all perspective, right? Wait, do you work with people all over the world?
Yes, yes, everywhere. I work with time zones in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, obviously, Canada, in US.
Are
Yeah,
you
I've even had
finding,
clients in.
oh, okay, so between countries, cultural differences, do you find that there are a lot of common denominators, or is it a different approach depending on what country the person is from?
I would say the country has nothing to do with it because men and women are pretty much uh, the same everywhere. Yeah, women need to feel loved and adored, and men love sex. So that's very basic. But ultimately, nobody wants to be on their own, and people feel lonely, and they would like a partner for life.
So when you work with people, typically, is it individual as to how quickly you can help them find a partner? Is there a schedule you're on? Is there a program that's a certain length? How do you work?
Okay, so the first part is always the part that I focus on the most, and that's because if people have a high score in the ACE test, that's going to take longer. Like people who are in a fearful avoidant, which is 5% of the population, they would take longer. But interestingly, I've even had clients that have had a high score and they have found someone secure very quickly because a secure partner is more likely to fit well and accommodate someone. But yeah, the first part, it can be like I run a program that can be 26 weeks to a whole year, depending on where people are at. And it's a flexible program which is customized to the person's specific situation.
Oh, actually, you mentioned something earlier. It got me thinking, is there a certain, like avoidant secures attract avoidant, or is there certain pairings that happen, or can it just, they interact? How
Absolutely.
does it work?
A bit like magnets where they have this, the positive side and the negative side. The anxious attachment style tends to be attracted to and drawn like a moth to the flame to avoidance.
Interesting.
That's it. And avoidance are the biggest number and percentage of single people out there.
Okay, so that's interesting. So do you find that when they actually pair up, is there longevity between certain styles? Like I would just, intuitively it would be, well, two secure people would be the best match, but is that the case?
Of course, but they come off the market very quickly, secure people. Yeah, they like being in a relationship and they pair up very quickly, so they're not around very long. So, but there are still secure people out there, and I think it's easier for people to work on their own attachment style, and then it seems almost like gliding into a relationship. I've had several clients that now married. Once we've worked on the past traumas and attachment style has become a lot more secure, they just meet someone and they move on with that.
Yeah, well, I'm a huge advocate for clearing up past traumas. And yeah, we know that that is so important for life, for everything in life.
And
Yeah.
talking about life, I'm trained also in past life therapy, and I've actually worked with clients that needed to do a lot of resolution in past lives, which they've brought into this life, because sometimes that's where it starts from. It's unresolved past lives that have brought the issues into this life. So that can also be part of the process that I work with.
Yeah, I was also trained with that too. I don't work with it a lot, but I trained in it. It's quite fascinating. Even in the womb thing, issues in the womb.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've regressed people in the womb many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they pick up that trauma travels 3 generations, so the neurochemicals that are embedded in the mother actually go in through to the baby, and the baby's born almost with that addiction to those neurochemicals. It's no different to a drug addiction.
Yeah.
And they sense in the womb, I'm not safe. They can hear that this is not a safe environment. They come out with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything that you wanted to add that we haven't covered today you think is important for someone listening who is thinking, that's me, I'm over 40, I'm single, I'm not having any success finding a partner? What do you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, the time is ticking, and time is a resource we will never get back once it's gone. The older people are, the the more accumulation of negative experiences based on the past they're going to have. So you want to avoid that. And the other thing I want to add is what you said before. The whole point of this, my mission, my goal is to have quality relationship, because in the several, but two specifically studies, longitudinal studies, it was discovered that in particular the Harvard study, they studied people for over 75 years, and it's still going well into their 90s. The common denominator for longevity, health, well-being, and happiness was warm relationships. And quality relationships, when you have them in your life, it's just a different life. And it's definitely something that people will benefit from if they invest in it, rather than leaving it till later on.
It's the best. It's true. How can people get a hold of you if they want to work with you?
Well, I have a Facebook group. I have a website, fiorellamartin.com. They can book on there. I'm also on Instagram. I think it's Fiorella Martin Therapist. So I am everywhere. Even if they Google Fiorella Martin, it will come up quite a lot, because I've been around 22 years doing this.
Yeah, you have a free Facebook group actually. So anyone who is female, over 40, any other criteria, it's free to join, and there's great information on it. So they just answer a few questions and
yeah, there's only 3 questions, and they can just come into the group and just absorb the information and benefit from that until they're ready.
Yeah.
Otherwise, DM me, and I'm happy to get on a free call and have a conversation about it, and see that.
Okay, so I'm going to link all your information below, including your Facebook group, so people can get a hold of you, get more information from you, and if they're really wanting to find someone work with you, it sounds like a really, really great program.
Thank you so much, Alison. I really appreciate the time,
Yeah.
and the questions you asked were amazing.
Yeah, I'm happy. If you want to add anything else, if you think of anything else now, we can talk about it. But I do find it fascinating. Relationships fascinate me. And I love the fact that you do help people navigate the online world now, because it's a different way of approaching relationships. It's different.
I'll just add one more thing, and that is that the third phase of the program has developed quite in depth in the last few years, where people have different erotic love maps, and it's the discovery process that they can use in their relationship, because a lot of people, once they get familiar, the sexual part, the erotic part, goes out the window. And there is definitely a very important part of the relationship that needs to be nurtured, and actually provides a baseline for the relationship in the future. So learning about that and having that as a strategy and a method to maintain the relationship is really important.
Do you have men coming to you wanting to work with you, and you say, no, I just work with women?
No, I've had several, because even before I went online, I used to have a practice locally, and I used to have people come to me for relationships, men and women. I can work with men and I can work with women. I know men very well. The reason I targeted this demographic is because I have identified the struggle of women who have achieved career and profession and are super achievers, but they feel alone and they don't know how to have that quality relationship in their life.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'm going to link your info below. And for everyone who's watching, you know how to get a hold of Fiorella now. And if you want to work with her, I can absolutely tell you that what she's saying here is so important, especially getting to the bottom of your family model and how you grew up, and really getting on top of that first before moving on. That's going to be so helpful. So thank you again, Fiorella, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you very much. All the best. Bye.
Bye.